The Grand Hall, inside the Global Innovation Summit, was filled with light, cameras, and the quiet hum of anticipation. The event was being broadcast across continents. Banners of progress and unity hung on the polished walls. Tech leaders, scientists, and diplomats filled every seat. The front row sparkled with famed Sundar Pichai, sat near the center, calm and focused, with his mother Lakshmi Pichai quietly beside him. Then came the announcement: Modi ji had arrived. Every seat in the room emptied in seconds as the entire audience stood in unison. Claps erupted, cameras flashed. Some even held back tears. The energy was electric, vibrating through the air like thunder under soft skin. But amidst all the applause, one man remained seated: Sundar Pichai. A sharp gasp passed through the rows behind him. A few phones stopped recording. The camera feed hesitated on his still figure. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't distracted. He sat with his hands on his knees, head slightly bowed, looking down at his shoes. Modi ji noticed. He looked toward the seated figure as he walked toward the stage. Their eyes met, just for a moment. The room, full of noise, somehow felt like a vacuum. No one knew what was happening. No one dared to speak. Whispers began, almost instantly. Why didn't he stand? Was this protest? Was something wrong? Was he offended? Lakshmi Pichai, his mother, placed her hand gently over her son's. Her expression was not of confusion, but concern. She leaned toward him, whispered something no microphone caught. Sundar shook his head slightly, lips pressed tight. He did not move. On stage, Modi ji raised his hand for silence. The crowd settled. He adjusted the microphone. His first words were not what anyone expected. Sometimes silence tells a louder story than sound, he said. The words hit the audience like cold water. They didn't know whether to clap or wait. Most waited. Before I speak about innovation, I wish to ask Sundar ji one thing, he said, looking directly at him. Will you join me here? If you are ready. There was no judgment in his voice, no anger, just calm respect. Sundar stood, but slowly, not rushed, not panicked. He held his mother's hand for a second longer, then let go, and walked alone toward the stage. The cameras followed every step. Some faces in the crowd looked puzzled, some shocked, a few even irritated. They didn't understand. But as Sundar reached the stage and stood beside Modi ji, the Prime Minister turned to the audience and said, "Let him speak." There was silence again. Sundar reached for the mic, paused, and took a deep breath. "I wasn't disrespecting Modi ji," he began, voice even. "I was remembering a promise I made." He looked toward the side curtain, and then back to the crowd. 30 years ago, a woman stood in a government line in Chennai for 8 hours so I could get one book, a science book. She stood because she believed I might do something meaningful. Today she is sitting in this hall, and I couldn't stand, because that moment was not just about greeting a leader. It was about honoring the person who made me who I am. He looked at his mother. Tears were already in her eyes. My silence was for her. The audience didn't clap at first. They just watched, still processing the depth of his words. The weight of it. Then slowly, one by one, people began to rise again, not for Modi ji this time, but for Sundar's mother. Lakshmi Pichai, stunned and tearful, looked around as the entire hall stood for her. Modi ji stepped closer, took her hand, and helped her to the stage. The applause was now thunderous, louder than before. But this time it was not out of formality. It was out of understanding. No one remembered what was on the schedule next. No one looked at their phones. All eyes were on her. Lakshmi stood on stage, beside her son and the Prime Minister, unsure what to say. She didn't need to. Sundar turned and simply said, "She's the reason I'm here." And for the first time that day, she smiled. But behind that smile was a storm of memories. And what the world didn't know was that the next 5 days would reveal even deeper truths. Ones that would test respect, loyalty, and family like never before. The applause still echoed in Lakshmi Pichai's ears, even after she stepped off the stage. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden weight of attention. All her life, she had lived in the quiet corners behind curtains, behind her husband's shadow, behind her son's success. Now, the spotlight felt like a warm sunbeam and a blinding glare all at once. Backstage, Sundar stayed by her side. They sat together in a small waiting area, away from the cameras, away from the noise. A tray of untouched tea sat on the table between them. Double quotes AMMA. He said softly, "I didn't mean to scare you." Lakshmi looked at him, her expression unreadable. She took a breath, then placed her hand on his cheek. "You remembered," she whispered, "after all these years." He nodded. "How could I forget?" She turned her eyes away, staring at the plain wall in front of them. "I almost didn't come today," she said. "Why?" Sundar asked, confused. Lakshmi took a long pause. Her voice dropped. "Because of what arrived yesterday. A letter." Sundar's body tensed. "A letter?" he asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn, the handwriting shaky and faint. She handed it to him. He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the page. His hands froze. "Dear Lakshmi, you don't know me, but you knew my son. 30 years ago, you stood in line so he could learn. But do you remember the boy who waited behind you? The one who never got the book because they ran out? That boy was my son, and he never got his chance. Today, he is gone. I don't blame you, but I wanted you to know your kindness cost someone else their dream." There was no signature, just a date. Sundar stared at the paper. His throat went dry. This can't be real." "I don't know," Lakshmi said, "but it has haunted me since it arrived." "You did nothing wrong," Sundar said firmly. "You stood in that line because we had nothing. You sacrificed for me. But what if my small step forward was someone else's step back?" Her voice cracked. Sundar placed the letter down. His mind began to swirl. Who had sent it? Was it true? Was this an attempt to bring guilt? Or to make them doubt? Or was it someone reaching out, crying for help, but too late? He looked back at the envelope. No name, no return address. "We can't let this distract us," Sundar said gently. "We'll find out who sent this. But Amma, your kindness didn't ruin a life. It saved mine." She smiled, weakly. But he saw the doubt still swimming in her eyes. Outside, the crowd was waiting. News channels were already replaying the moment. Social media overflowed with praise and questions. Why did Sundar stay seated? Who was the woman he honored? What was their story? But inside, behind closed doors, a deeper story was unfolding. Later that evening, Sundar sat in his hotel room. The letter was still in his pocket. He opened his laptop and began searching school records, trying to recall anyone who had stood behind him and his mother that day. He was just a child then, but memories came in flashes: heat, sweat, dusty pavement, and the boy behind him who wore no shoes. A name came to him: Arun. He remembered the boy had a wide smile, despite the dust on his face. Could it be him? He typed in the name. Too many results, but then something odd happened. A news article popped up from a local Tamil newspaper dated 4 years ago. Local youth advocate Arun Raj passed away after battling illness. He was known for tutoring underprivileged children and promoting access to education in rural areas. Sundar stared at the image. The same eyes, the same smile. Arun. He clicked further. A tribute blog appeared written by Arun's mother, and in that blog was a scanned copy of a letter addressed to someone named Lakshmi. It was the same letter, except it had a signature: Mrs. Rajalakshmi, mother of Arun Raj. His breath caught in his throat. So it was real. But there was more. At the bottom of the blog post, the mother had written something else. If you ever find this, I hope you don't feel guilt. You inspired my son more than you'll ever know. He spent his life helping others get the books he never had. And for that, I thank you. Sundar sat back. The pain in the first letter wasn't blame, it was grief. It was a broken heart, trying to understand fate. And in the end, it turned to gratitude. He knew he had to tell his mother. But more than that, he had to do something. He opened his phone and made a call. Hello, came the voice on the other end. This is Sundar Pichai, he said. I need help finding a woman named Rajalakshmi, sir. May I ask why? Because it's time someone stood for her. The next morning, Lakshmi sat by the window, watching the sunrise over New Delhi's skyline. Sundar entered quietly, placed a small box on the table, and sat across from her. Amma, he said, I want you to come with me today. There's someone I want you to meet. She looked at the box, then at him. Who? He smiled. Someone who also waited in line. The car ride was long. They left the city and entered the quiet edges of Tamil Nadu. 3 days later, through narrow roads and past old-school buildings, they finally reached a small village with colorful houses and children running barefoot in the dust. A woman stood at the gate of a humble home. Her hair was white, her sari simple. She looked up as the car stopped. Lakshmi stepped out first. Their eyes met. No words came, only tears. Rajalakshmi walked forward and took Lakshmi's hand. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Rajalakshmi said softly, I wrote you a letter. I didn't know if it would reach you. Lakshmi nodded. It did. Did you hate me? Rajalakshmi asked. Never, Lakshmi whispered. But it hurt. The two women sat under a tree. Sundar joined them, holding a book. The same title from 30 years ago. He handed it to both women. This is the book you both fought for, he said. One got it, one didn't. But both gave something far more powerful. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten message. To the mothers who made the future. Thank you. And in that moment, under a quiet sky, something old was healed. Something silent was honored. And the story that began in a long government line had now come full circle. But what none of them knew yet was that the summit wasn't over, and a new challenge was waiting. One that would ask Sundar to risk everything he had built because of a truth that had just been uncovered. 3 days later, the summit resumed with even more global attention. News channels replayed the moment Sundar honored his mother. Newspapers printed side-by-side photos of Lakshmi and Rajalakshmi, two mothers with one shared past. Social media trended with hashtags like #MothersOfChange and #TheBookThatUnitedUs. But while the world watched with admiration, Sundar's phone buzzed with a message that made his heart skip. It came from an unknown number. What you said on stage was touching, but do you really know the full story of that book? Maybe you only saw one side. Meet me if you want to know what happened before you ever stood in that line. Below the message was a location, a quiet corner in Chennai, near an old railway station. He stared at it for a long time. His mind raced. What full story? What happened before? He didn't reply. Instead, he forwarded the message to his security team. But curiosity grew louder than caution. The next morning, after making sure his mother was safe and resting at the hotel, he asked his driver to take a detour alone. The railway station was mostly abandoned. Chipped walls, broken benches, old posters faded under years of sunlight. He walked quietly, scanning the area. Under a tin shelter, a man sat with a small bag beside him, thin, unshaven, wearing worn clothes, but his eyes were sharp. You came, the man said. Sundar nodded, standing a few feet away. Who are you? Someone who remembers the line, the man said. But unlike you, I wasn't there for a book. Sundar narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? My father worked at the ration office across the street. He told me about a woman who showed up every month, waiting longer than anyone, always polite, always patient. My mother, Sundar said. Double quotes, yes. And once, my father gave her 2 tokens instead of 1. He said she deserved it. He didn't know what she'd do with it. Sundar took a step closer. What did she do? The man smiled. She gave 1 away. To a boy who had nothing. Sundar's heart thumped. What boy? Me, the man whispered. I was that boy. Silence filled the dusty station. I didn't come to hurt you, the man said. But when I saw your face on TV, honoring your mother, I felt something stir. The world should know not just what she did for you but what she did for others too. Why now? Sundar asked. Because I thought she forgot. Because I thought the world forgot people like me. But then I saw her face, and it all came back. Sundar's eyes softened. You should have told her sooner. I wasn't sure she'd remember. I was just another boy in the crowd. What's your name, Raghu? Sundar reached into his coat and pulled out a folded newspaper. It had a photo of Lakshmi and Raya Lakshmi standing beside each other. 2 mothers shaped this story, Sundar said. Maybe there's a 3rd part now. He handed the paper to Raghu. Come with me, Sundar said. Tell your story. That evening, a small press conference was arranged. Nothing formal. Just a few reporters. Sundar stood beside his mother, beside Rajmi, and then, stepping into the light, came Raghu. No one recognized him, but as he began to speak, every word struck deep. I never had a school bag, never had shoes. I had 1 shirt. But one day, a woman in a blue sari gave me a token. She said, get your book, child. I'll find another. I never forgot. Lakshmi looked at him with wide eyes. Then slowly, she covered her mouth. You're the boy in the yellow shorts, she whispered. Ragh. You smiled. Tears began to fall. Not just from Herb, from others in the room. Sundar stepped forward. This is the full story, he said. Not just 1 son, not just 1 book, but a ripple. 1 act of kindness that touched lives beyond anything we ever imagined. Cameras clicked, flashes blinked, but for once, they weren't just capturing a headline. They were witnessing healing. Back in the hotel room later that night, Sundar sat with his laptop open. He typed an email draft with a clear subject line. Proposal, the Pichai Initiative. Giving books to the next billion. He wasn't sure how long it would take. He didn't know how many would join, but he knew one thing. A line wasn't just something you waded in. It was something you could extend forward. And he intended to make that line stretch across the world. 3 days later, as Sundar prepared to leave India, he got another message, this one from the summit director. Prime Minister Modi has invited you to speak again. But this time it won't be just about innovation. He wants you to talk about legacy. Sundar stared at the message for a while. He thought of the line outside the book office. He thought of Arun. He thought of Raghu. He thought of 2 mothers who had quietly shaped giants. He replied, yes, but I won't speak alone. The next time he walked on stage, he held his mother's hand, and on the other side, he held Raghu's, and somewhere in the front row, Raja Lakshmi sat with her hands folded and a soft smile. Sundar took the mic and said, we often think legacy is about what we build, but sometimes it's about what we give away. He paused, then looked to Raghu. He didn't get his book that day because someone gave him hers, and that moment turned him into a teacher. He looked to the audience. You think the world is changed by leaders on stage, but sometimes it is changed by mothers in line. The hall was silent, and then, rising slowly, the entire audience stood. This time, Sundar remained standing too. But the moment wasn't finished, because just as he turned to leave the stage, a hand was raised from the crowd. A young woman stood up, notebook in hand. Sir, she called out, voice shaking slightly, I just wanted to say, I was one of the kids Raghu taught. She turned to him. You didn't just change one life, you changed hundreds. And suddenly, the story deepened again, and the crowd held their breath, sensing more truth waiting to be uncovered. As the applause echoed once more through the grand summit hall, Sundar turned slowly toward the young woman who had just spoken. She looked nervous, her notebook still clutched tightly in her hands. The cameras turned toward her. The crowd quieted. Please, Sundar said, gently, tell us your name. She cleared her throat, her voice low, but steady. My name is Shanvika, she said. I'm from Thiruvalur district. My parents were farmers. We barely made enough to eat, let alone go to school. She looked directly at Raghu, who now stood frozen, blinking in disbelief. When I was 9, she continued, I used to sell flowers on the roadside. One day, a man came up to me and said, you should be holding a pencil, not petals. He took me to a dusty building filled with children, just like me, and he taught us, every evening, for free. Raghu's voice cracked as he whispered, that was you. She nodded, smiling through tears. I was just one of many. You gave us hope when no one else did. A hush fell across the crowd. Even the most senior officials sat in stunned silence. This moment wasn't planned. It wasn't scripted. It was real. Sundar stepped forward and placed a hand on Raghu's shoulder. Your story, he said softly, didn't end in that line. It began there. After the summit, the video of Shanvika's testimony went viral. It was shared by educators, tech leaders, celebrities, and even students who had never heard of the quiet teacher named Raghu. Within 48 hours, emails flooded in from people claiming they had also been taught by him. A local journalist published a piece titled, The Man Who Taught Under the Banyan Tree. His story became a symbol not of poverty, but of transformation. But even as the world celebrated, Sundar found himself growing more restless. He remembered the quiet voice of Rajalakshmi, the grieving mother of Ern. Her letter still stayed in his pocket, now folded from repeated readings. He wondered about Ern's dream that had ended too soon, and something inside him whispered, what if there's more left of his dream than we think? He made a call to a regional office in Tamil Nadu and asked for archived school records, community outreach files, anything tied to Arun Raj. 3 days later, a government clerk replied with something unexpected. Sir, we found something, the clerk said, but it's strange. Go on, Sundar replied. It's a notebook from Arun Raj. He submitted it for a village youth competition. It was never picked up. It's still here. What's in it? Ideas. A full plan. He called it Project Second Chance. The notebook arrived 2 days later, by courier. Sundar opened it slowly. Inside, the pages were filled with sketches, charts, and careful handwriting. Arun had written an entire framework to help dropouts re-enter education through weekend learning camps. One line stood out, written in large letters. If the world won't open its doors, we will build a new gate. Sundar closed the notebook. Heart-pounding. Arun wasn't just a boy with dreams. He was a visionary, and his vision had never seen the light, until now. Sundar called an emergency meeting with his board. Within the next 48 hours, he presented a new program, the Arun Initiative. He stood before the executives with a quiet fire in his eyes. This will not be charity, he said. This will be structure, strategy, respect. We will find the Arns of the world and give their ideas the platform they never had. The board listened, some nodded, a few raised concerns: budgets, reach, scalability, but Sundar silenced them with one simple line. We have built the future with code. Now, let's build it with compassion. The room fell quiet. The motion passed. And just like that, a forgotten notebook became a blueprint for global change. A month later, in a remote village where Arun once lived, the first Second Chance Learning Center opened. Ragh, you stood at the gate, now wearing a proper shirt, a badge, and a humble smile. He had been asked to lead the first batch of students. Sean V, aka, now a university student, volunteered to teach part-time. Lakshmi and Rajalakshmi were invited to light the inaugural lamp as the sun dipped behind the banyan tree. The children took their seats on woven mats. One girl raised her hand and asked, "Sir, what is second chance?" Raghu knelt beside her. "It's a gift," he said, "for people who never stopped dreaming, even when the world stopped looking." Back in the city, Sundar sat in his quiet office, watching the live stream from the village. His eyes stayed on the smiling children, the flickering lamp, the chalkboards filled with possibility. And then, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from someone unexpected. "Dear Sundar, I'm Arun's cousin. I just found an old USB drive of his. It has something you need to see. I think he knew all along that one day, someone like you would find it." Attached was a short video file. He downloaded it and clicked play. The screen lit up with a teenage heroine, sitting on a stool in a dim room. Behind him, old textbooks stacked like towers. "Hi," Arun said in the recording. "I don't know who will see this. Maybe no one. But if you're watching, it means you care." He smiled nervously. "I always believed one act of kindness can become a ladder. Someone gave my mother a place in line, and my dream was born. If I don't make it, maybe someone else will climb that ladder instead. Just promise me one thing, don't let it fall." The screen faded to black. Sundar sat still, the words echoing in his mind. A ladder, a legacy, a promise. He wiped his eyes, then began writing an email titled, "Global Rollout Strategy for Project Second Chance." But even as he wrote, another voice echoed in his mind. This time, it was his mother's. A single act of kindness always finds its way back. And the truth was her act had already changed thousands. But soon, it would change millions. The Arun initiative had grown beyond expectations. 8 villages in Tamil Nadu now had second chance centers. Students who once worked in fields or sold roadside snacks were now reading, writing, and dreaming. And yet, Sundar felt something unfinished. Deep within him, he had honored his mother. He had shared Arun's voice. He had given Raghu's journey a new path. But he had said nothing about himself, about why he didn't stand that day. Yes, he had mentioned his mother. Yes, the world had wept at the gesture. But a deeper truth remained, one he hadn't shared with anyone, not even her. And now, as he prepared to speak at the United Education Forum in Delhi, a global event broadcast to over 90 countries, he felt a weight settle on his chest again. A familiar silence. This time, he knew he couldn't carry it alone. The night before the speech, Sundar sat beside his mother in their guest house courtyard. It was quiet. The moon sat like a shy guest above the palm trees. Lakshmi poured him a cup of warm milk, the way she had done when he was a boy. He took it, then placed it down. "Amma," he said softly, "there's something I never told you." She looked at him, waiting. "You remember that day we stood in line for the book?" "Yes," she said. "Do you know what happened before we got there?" Lakshmi paused. "You were quiet that morning. I thought it was because of hunger." He shook his head. "That morning, I saw a boy get beaten by his father for asking for a book. I was hiding behind a cart when it happened. I didn't tell you." Lakshmi's face stiffened. "I remember his eyes," Sundar said. "They were full of fear, but they were also full of want, like he believed something better was out there, and he'd asked for too much." His voice cracked. "When you took me to the line that day, all I could think was, what if someone hurts me too? What if asking for something makes people angry?" Lakshmi took his hand. "Oh, my son. But then you waited. You stood in that heat for hours. You smiled at strangers. You fought politely. And when you handed me that book, it felt like you gave me permission to want." Tears slipped down Lakshmi's cheeks. "Amma, that's why I didn't stand the day Modi ji walked in. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was just remembering the boy who once thought he had no right to ask. He looked down, and in that moment, I was still him. Lakshmi leaned forward and held him close. But look who you became, she whispered. And look how many you're lifting now. He nodded, his tears soaking into her shoulder. I just hope that boy found peace, he said. You became his peace, she replied. You made sure others never had to hide behind carts again. The next morning Sundar stepped onto the stage of the United Education Forum. Thousands sat in rows. Cameras hovered above. Live feeds rolled across giant screens. He looked out at the sea of faces. This time, he wasn't nervous. He was ready. He placed a small object on the podium, a faded book. The same one from his childhood, now worn but still whole. He began. I once stayed silent when everyone stood. People thought it was defiance. It wasn't. He paused. It was memory. It was fear. And it was the echo of a boy who believed he didn't matter. The audience leaned forward. Double quotes today, I want to say. Something to that boy and to every child like him. He turned slightly toward the camera. You matter. Your questions matter. Your hunger for knowledge matters. And no parent, no teacher, no leader should ever make you feel small for wanting more. Applause started but faded quickly. As Sundar raised his hand, I used to think success was about building things, phones, software, platforms. But now I believe real success is building people. He lifted the book. This gave me the tools. But kindness gave me the chance. He paused again, looking down at the book's frayed edge. And now, I give it back to the world. That same day, as his speech went viral across news networks and social platforms, a quiet moment unfolded in a village far away. Under a tree, a young girl named Annika sat in the Second Chance Center, holding a brand new notebook. She looked up at Raghu and asked, Sir, do you think someone like me can become like him? Raghu smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. You already are, he said. You just haven't seen it yet. She hugged the notebook tightly and whispered, Then I'll study until I do. Later that night, Sundar's inbox overflowed. Teachers from across India, students from rural Kenya, a librarian from Mexico, a boy from Syria. They all said the same thing in different words. Thank you for standing for those who stayed seated. But there was one message that stood out. It was from a man named Amir. I was the boy you saw that day behind the cart. I've lived in silence for 30 years, until today. Your words freed me. Sundar read it twice, then a third time. He leaned back in his chair, hand over his eyes. The silence had finally spoken, and someone had heard, but the story was still not finished. Because while kindness echoes, it also evolves, and what came next would test everything Sundar had built when a global scandal threatened to tear it all down. The morning sun in Delhi glowed soft and golden, but inside the glass towers of the International Media Hub, the air was sharp tense. Sundar sat before a dozen flashing cameras and a room full of reporters. This wasn't a press conference he had planned. Just 3 days earlier, an anonymous post had appeared on a global forum claiming the Arun initiative was secretly favoring certain regions, funneling funds into hand-picked villages while neglecting others. Hashtags spread like wildfire, hashtag favoritismgate and hashtag second chance or favoritism. Overnight, faith in the project began to fracture. Politicians called for transparency. Rival groups demanded audits. Public voices who once praised him now questioned his intentions. He hadn't slept in 2 nights, but he never flinched. He sat quietly at the front, flanked by his legal counsel and program coordinators. Beside him sat Lakshmi, as calm as ever, and a few rows back sat Raghu Shanvika and dozens of children from the very villages he'd helped. Their presence gave him strength. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Pichai, did you or your team show bias while selecting village centers for the initiative? Sundar took a breath. No, he said simply. Our selections were based on existing infrastructure, ease of access, and urgency of need. We are working on expansion for remote areas. What about the claim that a close associate of yours, Raghu, received preferential treatment? Another reporter asked. Sundar looked up. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to Raghu. Come, he said gently. Raghu hesitated, then walked to the front. Standing beside him, this is Raghu, Sundar said. The boy, my mother, once gave a token to. The man who taught under a banyan tree with no salary, no roof, no support. When I found him, he wasn't seeking help, he was still giving it. Sundar turned back to the press. Yes, I brought him into this, not because of favor but because of faith. The room quieted, and if standing beside him means being questioned, then I accept that, because silence in the face of truth is far worse than any scandal. He paused. You can audit every transaction. We've made the data public. We welcome full scrutiny, not because we fear your doubt, but because we trust our path. The reporters exchanged glances. Sundar continued, voice firm now. We built this project on memory, not money, on healing, not headlines. He reached for his bag and pulled out Arun's original notebook, the one that inspired everything. And this came from a boy who never had a spotlight. His dream was pure, and I will not let politics dim that. He held it high. If anyone thinks this project should end, I'm ready to step aside. But let the children decide. Let the mothers, who sat in long lines, tell you if this helped. Not anonymous voices online. There was silence, a long, deep silence, and then, from the back of the room, a young woman stood up. Sir, she said softly, I come from a village not yet reached by your program. I was angry when I saw the posts, but today, I see you, and I see him. She pointed to Raghu. So I have a question, not for you, but for the world. Why do we always attack those who try to fix what we ignored? She sat down. No one spoke after that, not even the critics, because her words carried the weight of honesty. Within 48 hours, the official audit cleared all allegations. No misuse, no favoritism, no hidden dealings. The world had held its breath and exhaled with relief. But Sundar wasn't celebrating. He was reflecting, because the trial had taught him something he hadn't expected. You can give everything your time, your heart, your truth, and still be doubted. But the answer isn't to hide. It's to keep walking. A month later, under a giant tree in Arun's village, a new center opened, the Arun Raj Memorial Library. Its shelves were lined with donated books, its walls painted with quotes from Arun. Raghu and Sundar, Lakshmi and Raja Lakshmi, stood side by side, lighting the ceremonial lamp. Sundar read a line from Arun's old notebook out loud. If your story survives your name, you've lived well. Children clapped, mothers cried, teachers smiled, and, for the first time, the pain of the past felt like purpose. As the sun dipped behind the mountains that evening, Sundar sat alone on the library steps, watching the children run barefoot across the field. The laughter reminded him of another time, another place when he too had run across cracked pavement, clutching a book like it was treasure. His phone buzzed again, a message from a girl in Nepal. I watched your speech. My village just got its first chalkboard. I taught my little brother the alphabet. Thank you for reminding me that I matter. He closed his eyes and smiled. Yes, this was the point. Not power, not praise, just a ripple reaching far, far beyond where it began. Back in Delhi, Modi ji addressed the nation during an Education Day ceremony. He held up a simple book, the same title that Sundar once received in line. Today, he said, we honor not just leaders, but those who raised them. We honor mothers who waited in the heat, teachers who taught with nothing, and sons who remembered where they came from. Then he said one final line that echoed across TV screens, radios, and hearts. When Sundar Pichai remained seated, he wasn't being small. He was showing us how deep roots must go before they rise. And somewhere, under a tree, a girl wrote her first sentence. In another country, a boy read his first book, and in the silence between words, the world listened. Because kindness doesn't shout, it doesn't march, it whispers, and those who hear it are never the same again. The Arun initiative expanded to over 30 countries. Remote classrooms were built on mountaintops. Solar-powered libraries opened in dusty corners of Africa. Floating schools began operating on rivers in Bangladesh. And everywhere, children held books in their hands for the first time. Sundar watched it all unfold. Like a dream he never dared to dream, but something still pulled at his heart. Not guilt, not fear, a quiet call. Unfinished. Unfinished. A year after his speech at the United Education Forum, Sundar visited Chennai again, this time without the cameras, without an escort, without announcements. He walked the streets of his old neighborhood wearing a simple shirt and slippers. The air smelled the same. The corners looked smaller now. The shop where he once bought pens was still open, run by the same man. And then, as the sun dropped low, he stood once again outside the government book office, the place where everything began. It was quiet, run down. No line, no mothers, no dusty boys with wide eyes, just the building. Sundar stepped through the rusted gate and walked to the spot where he and his mother had once stood. He knelt down, ran his fingers over the cracked stone, and closed his eyes. He remembered the fear, the sweat, the heat, the hunger. But above all, he remembered her, his mother, her steady voice, her firm hand, her unwavering belief. His eyes filled. He whispered, "Thank you." A light wind passed through the trees, somewhere in the distance. Children were laughing. The next morning, Lakshmi and Rajakshmi arrived at a small indoor event. It wasn't broadcast. It wasn't publicized. Only those closest to Sundar were there. He stood at the center, holding a small box. "This," he said, "is not a product launch. This is a promise." He opened the box. Inside was a key. "This is the key to the School of Legacy. It will be built right here in Chennai, the land where that old book office stands." The room held its breath. The school will teach technology, but also ethics, compassion, storytelling, and above all history. The real kind. The kind built by people like Raghu, Arun, Rajalakshmi, my mother, and thousands more whose names history forgets. He turned to Lakshmi. "Amma," he said, voice breaking, "I am not here because I worked harder. I am here because you believed harder." Lakshmi stepped forward, but instead of speaking, she placed a gentle hand over his heart. Then she said, something no one ever forgot. "The world calls him Sundar Pichai, but to me, he's just the boy who asked for one more book." And in that moment, there was no applause, just silence. Soft, deep hold. 2 years later, the School of Legacy opened its doors. Children from around the world came to learn. Not just facts, but courage. Not just skills, but story. Outside the entrance, carved in stone, were words chosen by Sundar himself. "The line you stand in today may feel invisible, but one day, the world will see where you stood and why." Inside the lobby hung 3 portraits. One of Aaron, holding his notebook. One of Raghu, under his banyan tree. And one of Lakshmi, standing in line, her hand clutching a token below her. Image, it read. She gave away her turn and changed the world. On the 5th anniversary of the initiative, Sundar received a letter. Written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Sundar, I am that girl from Nepal who taught my brother the alphabet. Today, I was offered a job to teach in your School of Legacy. My dream came true. Not because I was rich, not because I was lucky, but because someone remembered a child behind the cart. Thank you for never forgetting us. Love, Annika. He folded the letter and placed it on his desk, and for a long time, he simply stared out the window at the sun, at the sky, at the rising shape of a world, made better not by noise, but by small, steady hands. And so the story ended, with no fireworks, no fanfare. Just a ripple that became a wave, and a boy who stayed seated so the world could finally stand.